My name is Lance Conrad, and I'm an author. I write books for a living. I went from crawling to sprinting. Now I could run through not just one world, but many. Live not just one life, but hundreds.
He wants to marry her. He'll have to come to Tetouan.
And how about a nice spoiled cousin who bullies him all the time, right? What if these two characters fell in love? What if these two characters fought to the death? Show me him standing up against an entire army single-handed. And drove most of the race before hopping out to run the last one. That's a little bit different. True story, by the way. Somebody went on a trip or somebody came into town. There's your plots. They took that big old forehead and just crashed every brick, board, and brother in the house. Let me tell you a story.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Story Stream. Today we are talking about European royalty, Inbreds, and Outlaws. And I do apologize a bit for the title. That is a little bit clickbait, but kind of true. I came up with that, right? Actually. Yeah, it's
I'm very
fault,
proud.
But,
well, in my defense, this is a subject that is a great big blind spot for me as far as history. I've never really gotten into the whole European royalty and royal families thing.
yeah, partially because, and I'll just say this as a warning as we start, a lot of these are going to be dark stories. I mean, spoiler alert, they all die, right? So they're all dead now. And yeah, there was just some weird stuff that came on.
Well,
And-
all the people that we're going to be talking about are dead. Not all royalty is dead. There are still a few.
Yes.
Few kicking around still.
But there was absolutely inbreeding, though.
Yes.
A lot. In fact, part of it was just a class thing, right? Even Queen Victoria, right? The Queen Victoria.
Yes.
There was scandal when she married Prince Albert. And you notice it's not King Albert and Queen Victoria, it's Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And there was scandal when she married Prince Albert, her first cousin, but not... That wasn't what the scandal was about. The scandal was that he was lesser nobility, right? He was only some duke or something, right? And so there was scandal about him not being high enough royalty. And so generally the ideal was that you would marry the highest of royalty. The problem is that really, really limits your gene pool. And it starts out with actually Charles V. Okay.
Of where?
Of most places. He was a holy Roman emperor.
Okay.
Ruled over most of Europe. Pushed back a lot of things. We're not actually going to deal with him. But he was kind of this amazing figure and started, or rather really defined the Habsburg line.
Okay.
Right? And then his children kind of became the ruling class of Spain, which certainly became a huge power in and of itself, and Austria, which also became a huge power, which this is going to come in later.
There is I would like to point out there is a gap between those two countries. Is there a story there?
No, not really. There wasn't as much of a gap back then. Okay, Austria absolutely did. We hear Austria now, and it's just this kind of one of the European countries. But for a lot of European history, it was huge and took over a lot of those Slavic states like Serbia and Croatia. It had Hungary. It had parts of Italy. It was a much larger deal.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, they had this tie-in through Charles V, and so, like I said, trying to keep with the highest royalty you could get, they largely married each other. And the Spanish Habsburgs got to marrying each other a whole lot, almost exclusively, where you had children who were children of first cousins marrying, who were children of first cousins marrying, and I believe out of 11 marriages leading to the end of the Habsburg line, out of those 11, 9 were cousin marriages. Third cousin at the most distant.
Wow. Okay.
And the problem is, while that may give you good social status, it also creates massive genetic mutations. Where the Spanish Habsburgs actually inbred themselves into extinction. They were gone. It got to the point where they could no longer reproduce. They had become so incredibly mutated is the only word for it. There was even the Habsburg chin, where the chin became incredibly pronounced. One of the last ones, his tongue was too big to fit in his mouth. There was madness. One of the last Carloses, not the last Carlos, but one of the last Carloses, Don Carlos is often called, was a complete maniac, lived to torture animals and servants and young girls, and yeah, he was just awful. Ultimately, I kind of believe killed by his father Philip.
Okay.
As almost kind of a mercy
Oh.
killing.
No, I have heard of this. I've heard of this guy, and I've heard of Philip.
Now, I didn't even mean to talk about this guy, right? This is
all sidebar.
this is all setup.
Oh boy.
Right?
Okay.
This all leads there. But yeah, those actually just, the whole line died out. The Habsburg line in Spain died out.
Can we take just a second to talk about the science of why you shouldn't marry cousins?
Did you want to? We have a lot to go over tonight. I'm fine to.
I don't feel like I have a great grasp of it, other than just you have a much higher probability of recessive genes sneaking through if you're marrying close relatives, right? Otherwise, you're mixing up the gene pool, and recessive genes, like those that can cause these genetic disorders, tend to get overshadowed by more dominant genes. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, a little bit incomplete. Part of it is you're messing with the statistics. One way to think about it is if I took a nice black bag that I can't see inside of,
Okay.
right? And I'm going to take a handful of red dice and a handful of blue dice and throw them in the bag and shake it up,
Okay.
right? And I'm going to reach in and pull out, let's say, 10 dice, okay?
Okay.
And let's say that if I pull out the dice and they are all the same time, or if I get a certain type of pattern, very, very bad things will happen.
So if they're all ones,
Right? If they're all ones, or if we get a red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, like that would be bad, all right?
then you get struck by lightning.
right, some
example.
bad thing,
Okay.
right?
Evil magic bag.
Evil magic
We
bag.
don't want
right?
certain
And
combinations.
Anytime any two people get married and have a child, that bag happens.
Okay.
Right? The dice get thrown in and a selection gets pulled out.
Red dice from the mother, blue dice from the father.
Sure.
Okay.
It matters little in the broad scheme of things. But when you get inbreeding, you don't re-scramble the bag. And so your chances of drawing a bad batch get higher and higher each time you do it, because you're not re-randomizing.
Okay.
Right? Now, these get played out on very, very large numbers when it comes to genetics, right? The number of chromosomes, the different ways that the DNA can interact. There's almost infinite variety, as long as you're bringing in new people. But when you have the same genetic pool being drawn from over and over again, a better analogy might have been cards, right? You shuffle the cards. If you draw an ace of spades, bad things happen. Well, you keep drawing and you don't bring in new cards. You don't shuffle, which means
Gotcha.
no matter what happens, you're eventually going to hit that ace of spades. You're eventually going to pull the wrong dice if you don't throw in new things.
You don't reshuffle.
If you don't reshuffle, right? Throw in green dice, right? Something like that, right? Mix it up.
Okay.
Okay.
So we can move on to whatever horrific story you have to tell next.
Right. So yes. And I'm going to be going the other way. So that was just kind of Spain, the Habsburg thing dying out. And, that's the whole dangers of inbreeding. And that kind of happened throughout a lot of European royalty because mostly wanted to marry other royalty. And that mostly had led to a lot of inbreeding. But I'm going to head towards the end. We had the last great emperor of Europe. And so I'm mostly going to be talking about Emperor Franz Joseph's family.
Okay.
So, now don't get me wrong. Emperor Franz Joseph was a very important and powerful individual, yada, yada, yada. But I find almost all of his family members and interactions a little bit more fascinating. So we are going to focus on the family of Emperor Franz Joseph.
Okay. Can you give me a when on Franz Joseph?
Okay, so he died right around when World War I is starting.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So this is recent.
Yes. So this is on, towards the decline of the monarchical era.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And so,
Franz Joseph.
here we are. Franz Joseph, Austria. Austria is this big power. And that, of course, brings us to Cinco de Mayo.
You have already lost me.
Really? Yes, Cinco de Mayo, ladies and gentlemen, coming up in just a few days or a week or something like that. Be sure to celebrate with your friends from Mexico in this wonderful traditional holiday, Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May.
Okay.
Do you know what they celebrate on the 5th of May?
I found out just recently that it is not Mexican Independence Day.
It is not. That happens, I believe, September 18th is Mexican Independence Day.
But I did not find out what it is, only what it isn't.
What it is fascinating. It was a victory of the Mexican army at the Battle of Puebla. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and they won against the French. Yep.
Once again, you have lost. And this is, okay, this is the continent I live on.
Yes, we are talking about European royalty in Mexico. And we're just going deeper.
How do I not know this stuff?
So we have this great celebration, Cinco de Mayo, celebrating this pucky band of Mexicans triumphing over the French.
Okay.
Who then, the French just retreat to the beach, wait for more reinforcements to show up, and then go ahead and conquer the Mexicans anyway.
That's not a great story.
It's not a great story, but they celebrate that battle so hard because they won before losing.
I feel like that's
crazier-
a very positive outlook.
Yes.
I approve.
Yes. Celebrate your victories, folks. That is absolutely the takeaway. I've often said that, or I wasn't the first one who said it, but whether or not a story has a happy ending or not mostly depends on when you end the story. So yes, they end the story at this courageous and amazing victory at the Battle of Puebla. And then the French came in
And wrecked everything.
and wrecked everything. Now we come to the why. Santa Anna, there was a opportunity. Santa Anna, the Santa Anna of the Alamo and all that, has died.
Of the movie The Mask of Zorro.
Yes. Or any number of things. He dominated Mexican government and military and culture, partially by being powerful and partially just by being crazy. Like he once had a state funeral for his leg. Okay. Not even the point.
Was
He's
his
gone
leg
now.
Oh, okay.
We're not talking Mexican history. We're going to do that another
have
time.
questions. We should. This is
We
all
should. We
new
should.
to
We should
me.
absolutely do Mexican history. And so there follows a period of time where things are just going really, really bad for Mexico.
Okay.
They have an average of a new government every 6 months or so.
Yikes.
Okay. And worst of all, this guy, Benito Juarez, who is very liberal, is starting to gain power and is starting to take power away from the traditional elite of Mexico, namely the rich, naturally, the military, and the Catholic Church. Right? These were like the 3 pillars of power in Mexico, and Benito Juarez starts knocking down the pillars, right?
Okay.
And to do that, he ends up in quite a bit of debt to European powers and says, I'm not gonna pay. And the European powers go, oh, yes, you are. Okay. And so Spain and France and Britain, I believe, all sail over there to make sure that they get that money.
Okay.
All right. However, they show up and the Spanish and the British figure out France isn't actually there for that. They have bigger plans. And so the British and the Spanish say, never mind, we're out, and they sail back. Because the French were being led at that time by Napoleon III.
Okay. Not Bonaparte.
Not Bonaparte, not the
We're
Napoleon.
after that a ways.
And that's exactly how he felt, right? Not the Napoleon. He was Napoleon III.
Terribly sorry. Did not mean to offend him. Didn't know that was a
He-
sensitive topic.
It was a very sensitive topic for him. He was Napoleon the freaking third. Okay? And everyone compared him to his uncle. The Napoleon.
Who was the Napoleon?
The Napoleon. All right, so Napoleon III is the Napoleon's nephew.
Okay. Who is the second?
I am so glad you asked.
Oh, no.
Napoleon II was never really there.
It jumps straight from 1 to 3? Is that what you're
Essentially,
saying?
yes.
Oh, boy.
Napoleon I gets defeated. Right?
Okay.
The Napoleon. Right? We don't actually even call him Napoleon I. We just call him Napoleon.
Napoleon Bonaparte,
Yeah.
Waterloo.
Yeah. Right? He is defeated and he decrees, my son will rule as emperor after me. And the coalition that defeated him goes, no, he won't. And that was Napoleon II. Was Napoleon's son, who he said would rule after him, and the coalition said, no, he won't. And
But he
that-
did have a son.
He did have a son.
So he did exist. He was just never king.
And the decree went out for a whole week and a half, 2 weeks, that he would be Napoleon II.
Oh, sad.
But he never ruled, never had any power, but he still holds on to the title Napoleon II, even though he was never in power in any conceivable way. So that was Napoleon II. So glad you asked. Napoleon III, right? Already the third. Didn't even get to be Napoleon Part 2. He is already the third, and he is a little bit upset about it. Got an inferiority complex, really wants to live up to his uncle's name, and his uncle has already sold off all of the French interests in America, known as the Louisiana Purchase,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so France doesn't really have a game to play in the New World, right? And wouldn't, because America has instituted the Monroe Doctrine, which tells all European powers, you stay out of America, we got dibs on messing with everything over here.
Right.
Okay? But then something happens right around this whole time. There's this beautiful opportunity just handed to Napoleon III, and that is
An excuse to invade Mexico.
but you need to be able to do it without interference. Luckily, the Americans were fighting each other. It was the Civil War, right? The Americans were fighting their own civil war. They're busy, and Napoleon III says, here's my excuse. I'll get my friends from Europe here on this pretense of going to get money, whatever, but I'm going to install a puppet person over here to reestablish French interests in the Americas while the Americans are busy killing each other. France for the win, and everyone will remember Napoleon III. Right?
Okay.
It was ambitious. But now, we have our opportunity. We have our opening, right? Everything's here. Now we just need someone weak. Right?
You mean to rule the country?
Yes. Right? You don't want a strong ruler for your puppet, right? You want somebody who is going to be very pliable. Right? And also somebody who has some extra political points wouldn't hurt. And he wants to strengthen the French relations with Austria, which again, at that time, incredibly powerful. And so they call on Franz Joseph's little brother, Maximilian.
Maximilian I have heard of, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Maximilian the First.
Yes, Maximilian I, who had been put in charge of this little place and had generally just been walked over. And Napoleon III sees this, he's like, perfect, right? This is my guy. And says, hey, how would you like to go be emperor of Mexico? And Maximilian says, not unless I am elected.
That, idealistic boy.
You just hit it perfectly. He is not weak. He is idealistic to quixotic levels. To a fault, to ridiculousness. He is an idealist.
I think I like Maximilian the First.
I kind of like him too. Everybody liked him. Even when they killed him, they liked him. Sorry, spoilers.
Dang it.
So he says, not unless I am elected. And Napoleon III is like, okay, let me talk to my boys over here, and talks to the wealthy, the military, the Catholics, the ones who are being disenfranchised.
Right.
Who are the ones kind of welcoming the French over, right, to reestablish that strong hand. And they go, an election? Sure. In fact, just had one. Everybody wants Maximilian to come over. And so Napoleon III says, good news, election came back. The people of Mexico want you to be their emperor. Congratulations on winning the election. Head on over.
Well, that worked out nicely with absolutely no loose ends.
I know. And he buys it. He buys it so hard. He believes that the people of Mexico have reached out for his guidance. And he gets over there and starts doing, in many ways, worse than what Benito Juarez was doing. Right? The rich people in the military and the church were like, sweet, we got, European royalty over here, give us back all our stuff. And he's like, no, it belongs to the people.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He quickly alienates all of his allies, reaches out to Benito Juarez, invites him to come and be prime minister.
No.
Right? And Benito Juarez, by the way, declines. He just doesn't want a foreign anything. But he is just so
Okay.
open and friendly and learns Spanish and walks among the people, talking to them and just generally being the nicest guy in the world. And yeah, just trying to create this Mexican utopia for all the people who voted him in. Right?
Oh, Max. Oh, you cinnamon roll.
Oh, he was. He really was. And, but then bad things happen.
I'm shocked.
Or rather, good things happen that are bad for Max.
Okay.
The American Civil War ends.
You're right. That's awful.
Yeah. Pretty bad for Max. And sure enough, they look around and go, France? What you doing? And they send down 50,000 troops to stand at the border. And according to one source, lose massive amounts of supplies over the border to Benito's boys.
Uh-huh.
Right? And the French decide this was not going well to begin with. This was not a puppet. This was some star-eyed boy here to build a utopia, some democracy or some. And you know what? We're out. Okay? Max, pack it up. We're leaving. Let's go back to Europe.
Max isn't
And-
leaving, is he?
He's not leaving. His people need him, Mike. They voted him in. He has a duty to his people. And so he
No.
remains behind as all the French soldiers and their support leave. His wife, Carlotta, who is just as idealistic, okay? She also urges him never to give up. We must save our people. Okay, and she goes to Europe to rally support for him. Okay, try to convince the royalty of Europe to go and support her dear Emperor Max.
Boy, this is awful for me because I actually already knew about Carlotta, but did not know all of this backstory.
Yeah.
Carlotta is one of the characters that pops up in my research as a madwoman
Yeah, she loses her
who
mind
has
in
lost
the attempt.
everything.
Yeah, she actually goes straight up crazy. Yeah, suffers a mental breakdown, never recovers. Her husband hears about this, wants to rejoin her, but decides his duty to his people is just more important. Right? As Benito and his boys surround his palace, his own officers betray him and open up the door. He is captured in prison and pretty much shown the open door like, hey, buddy, we all like you. We just can't have you here. So, you know,
should go.
we'll turn our back, hope he doesn't escape, and turn their back. He doesn't leave. He is just too idealistic. He is going to stay for his people. He is going to stay and die as an emperor. He is just too idealistic for this world. When he absolutely refuses to escape and abandon his friends who have already betrayed him. He is finally sentenced to death, walks out, and there's just a couple of quotes that I love. He says, they lead him out. He says, what a glorious day. I had always hoped to die on such a day. And then they line him up, and he says in, according to some sources, flawless Spanish, I forgive everyone, and I ask everyone to forgive me. May my blood, which is about to be shed, be for the good of the country. Viva Mexico! Viva la independencia! Long live Mexico, long live the independence. And they shoot him. And so ends, again, we're going to go by Franz Joseph's family, but there went his little brother. Carlotta survives him by 40 years.
I do want to throw in just the last 3 words. right? After the speech is done, he shakes hands with his executioners, gives each of them a coin. Then, because he doesn't want his face disfigured when his mother sees him, he walks back to the wall, points at his heart, and says, "Muchachos, aim well."
Yeah. Max was kind of awesome.
He was a little bit great, actually.
He was a little bit great, but he was also foreign ruler imposed on people and still remains this kind of symbol of colonialism, which is just so sad because that's not what he wanted. He wanted to serve the people who had elected him to be there. And he was not going to abandon them no matter what. And it's just
Dang it.
Anyway, so yes, that was the younger brother of Emperor Franz Joseph.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll leave off there. We'll let you tell a story, then we'll pop back to other members of Franz Joseph's family.
Okay. So, we are not hopping very far because we are going to go to Maximilian's brother-in-law, Carlotta's older brother? Younger brother? I actually don't know.
I can tell you it gets worse, but we'll get back to that.
Okay, so Carlotta's brother, Leopold II, King of the Belgians.
Okay, we got the Belgians.
Yes. He is called Leopold II, not just because he was the son of Leopold I, but also because he was the second king ever of Belgium.
Oh, so they didn't really do the whole king thing then.
Well, before, they had been basically just a battleground between France and Germany, right? It was after the Napoleonic Wars that the coalition got together and said, look, they are never going to give up fighting over this patch of ground. Let's make a new kingdom, give it a king, encourage them to be neutral, and we'll call it Belgium.
Cool.
And we'll get this guy, Leopold. He is a German prince. We'll have him come over and be king, and it'll be great. So Leopold I has his children, and he raises Leopold II to be, in his mind, the perfect king. And what that means is that if Leopold II wants to talk to his dad, he has to make an appointment, just like everyone else. He is he is imbued with this. How do I even describe it other than intense toxic masculinity from the time that he is very young? He has to be perfectly masculine. He has to be completely impersonal, right? He can't be biased in any way. He has to be the embodiment of the kingdom. And so that is how he is raised.
Okay.
In this kind of harsh environment. He is put into the military at a very young age, but when he gets older, when he's 30, he becomes king of Belgium when Leopold I passes away, and he starts looking for something to be his legacy. And after looking around for a bit, he gets this idea that what we really need is to go out into the world and do some colonizing. Because everybody's colonizing.
Everybody
right now.
was colonizing. It's a thing to do.
Let's get out there and get ourselves a colony. And he actually travels the world trying to find a colony that someone is willing to sell. Or lease, even. He's like, there's got to be somebody that's willing to let us have one of these. But nobody's really selling their colonies. So that's not a thing. And on top of that, Parliament, his Parliament, the king of the Belgians, is mostly a symbolic leader. He doesn't actually have that much power. So when he goes to Parliament and says, hey, we should really get a colony, they say, you know what, we're actually kind of okay. We've done the
We're
whole
just a little country.
we're just a little country. We've seen lots of war and fighting and stealing stuff. We're kind of okay. Like we've got everything that we need.
It's fine.
It's fine. Would you just be calm? So things aren't going great for him. He's kind of frustrated with this and kind of frustrated with the fact that he doesn't have more power to do whatever he wants.
I get frustrated with that myself.
Yeah. At one point later in his life, his nephew and heir apparent is with him in his office, and they've got a member of parliament there, and a gust of wind comes in through the window, knocks some papers off the desk. And the member of parliament goes to pick them up and says, "Oh, yeah, let me get those for you." And Leopold says, "No, let my nephew do it. He should get used to having to stoop before parliament."
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not even sure who he was burning in that moment.
So he's got a little bit of a complex about being an impotent king.
Right.
But one day he meets this very famous explorer, Henry Morton Stanley.
Okay.
Now you might have heard of him, or at least you have heard a very famous quote of his, which is,
Dr. Livingstone, I presume.
"That's the one." Because he spent years, like Livingstone goes missing in Africa, and he goes out and spends years combing the African interior to try to find this guy, and in the process becomes very, very famous. So he and Leopold meet up, and they immediately become friends. Right?
So this is a buddy story then.
This is a buddy story.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because Stanley, in his adventuring, had discovered the Congo River. Not discovered, but had explored more of the Congo River than anyone had ever seen. And the Congo River is this big loop, basically, that actually goes up over the equator and back down and then out to the ocean, so that part of the river is in the rainy season year-round.
Oh, wow.
So it never runs dry. It never goes low. And
That's
so
cool.
you've got, yeah, it's really cool. And so you get this extremely developed water system that's like, it's like this massive canal system just built by nature waiting to be exploited. The only problem is that right before it gets to the coast, it suddenly goes down miles and miles and miles of rapids.
Oh, dang. So
And
not
so-
not an effective route to the ocean. You couldn't ship along this river.
You just need to build a railroad from the top of the rapids to the bottom of the rapids, and you could just take boats and disassemble them, put them on the tracks, chug, 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 to the bottom, and you're on the ocean.
Okay, so a little bit of ingenuity, and Leopold could develop this whole region.
This is doable. Stanley has seen it, and King Leopold II is like, you know what? We need to do this.
Legacy.
This will be my legacy, is opening up the Congo Basin, the entire Congo River system, to civilization. And so he hosts the something geographical society. He hosts this enormous party in Belgium, where he just, it's this disgustingly lavish party, and he invites princes and lords and different like capitalist robber barons from all over the world, and he brings them all to Belgium to talk about, to like meet Henry Morton Stanley and to hear about the Congo. And everybody's very excited about what they hear. And he says, okay, here's what I propose. We found the International Africa Association. We'll gather funds and we'll build a road from below the rapids to above the rapids and open up this entire area to trade, to missionary work, to more exploration, to science, right? There's like all this rainforest in there. And on top of that, we can drive out the Arab slavers that raid in this area.
Gotta stop that slave trade.
Yeah. So everybody is on board with this. And a whole bunch of people buy shares in the International Africa Association, which funds Stanley to go back to the Congo. And he goes up the river, building these stations along the way and signing treaties with all of the tribes that live there.
Okay, doing things right.
Yeah. So Stanley comes back out, and he's got treaties with most of the tribes that live along these rivers. And they have announced that based on their cooperation with the International Africa Association, of which King Leopold is chairperson, that they want to become an independent country. The Congo Free State.
All these tribes want to become the Congo Free State?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
wonderful.
So a representative of the International Africa Association, actually at this point it has changed its name to something pretty similar and kind of forgettable. And they send a General Stanford to the U.S. to lobby various senators and President Chester A. Arthur to recognize this African country as its own independent entity. And he does, after some persuasion. And now we have, independent of all of the European powers, this independent African country that is being guided by this organization of philanthropists and humanitarians from around the world, the chairperson of which is this world-renowned philanthropist with a big fluffy white beard and a giant tricycle named King Leopold II.
Oh, Uncle Leo. Well, he sounds delightful.
Yeah, not bad. And it works, right? It opens up with the road built, and later they build a railroad, just like they planned. They're able to open all of this up to missionary work and trade, and they bring out all of this African art, and they bring out all of this ivory, which is used for everything at the time. Later, they start bringing out rubber because they've just figured out how to vulcanize rubber, and they set up these great big schools. They set up 3 giant schools in the interior, and they drive off the Arab slavers, and
Nice.
yeah.
All right.
And
well,
everybody lives happily ever after, pretty much.
Gee, Uncle Leo sounds amazing. So we developed this whole philanthropic organization, Stop the Slavers, this...
One more awesome fact.
Yeah, tell me more about this amazing Uncle Leo.
The tricycle was named Mon Animal, my animal. And he would ride around the street, like right around the palace and through the streets, both in Belgium and in Paris, where he spent a lot of his time, on this giant tricycle.
Well, what a lovable and inspiring character from history.
World-renowned philanthropist.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I would love to hear more about him. But first, let me just talk a little bit more about another member of Franz Joseph's family. I'm afraid after that delightful story about Leopold II, I'm going to have to go a little bit darker on this one.
If you must.
But we're going to go with Franz Joseph's wife.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Franz Joseph, his whole thing was he was just all about duty in his country, like he was the emperor, right? All the way down to his soul, right? And his mother decides that it's time that he should be married. And Franz Joseph never disobeys his mother. This is a thing. It's weird. And it is pervasive. Okay. She was the one who essentially made him emperor, right? She was the one behind the scenes, pulling all the strings, conniving with other people. She pretty much makes him emperor, and he is a good son and always listens to his mother. And so she decides it's time for him to be married, and she sends him to her sister's house to marry one of her daughters.
Oh, okay.
You know, 'cause cousins and whatnot.
Oh, this again.
This again and always, Mike. And so he goes, and she says, go marry Helen. I think there might have been some pronunciation thing like Helena or something, but you know, go marry Helen. She is a nice, proper girl. Go marry your cousin Helen. And he goes and shows up at Helen's house and sees her younger sister Elizabeth. And it is love at first sight on his part.
Oh, dang it.
And by the way, she's like 15 at the time. It's really creepy. But
of course she is.
Of course she is. That also happened. There's just no way around it. There was a lot of creepiness. But in his defense, he absolutely did love her and stayed devoted to her their entire lives.
Well, that's actually kind of rare for royalty.
No, he was, or for her entire life. He outlived her.
Okay.
But yes, no, it really was a love story. He really did love her. And he was emperor, so she married him.
Okay.
Not a lot of reason to believe that she was really as infatuated with him. Especially since she was never really going to be the one to marry into royalty. And so she and her dad, she had this really cool dad who would like interrupt her lessons on etiquette and everything and just, you know, take her out on adventures and horse riding. He was just this awesome father. The problem is now she's suddenly Empress of Austria, and all those lessons she missed now kind of important, right? She's been off having adventures and just having fun with dad, and now she's Empress, and now she's making all these mistakes that make her look like an idiot, most of all to her mother-in-law, the Archduchess Sophia.
Oh, boy.
So her mother-in-law thinks that she is an idiot and worse for not knowing all the social niceties, and takes it upon herself to control every part of this young lady's life, to the point that when they had their first child, a daughter, Sophia shows up, takes the child from the mother, names it Sophia, and departs with the baby. Like, straight gone, not, I'll bring it back. No, you don't get this baby, my baby, and leaves.
Oh, I have questions. Okay.
That's it. And she, of course, is heartbroken, says to her husband, can you do something? Like, I mustn't disappoint mother, right? He will not go against his mother. Okay?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Yeah. No, it's it's crazy creepy.
Wow. Okay, so
No, we're not done yet. We're just gonna keep this going because there is just so much.
Hey, you're wrecking my world right now. You're telling me that like the bad fairy tales are actually true.
Yes. The Prince Charming sees the beautiful younger sister, whisks her away. They get married.
There's an evil mother-in-law in this case, not a
there is
stepmother,
an evil
who takes
mother.
the baby and runs away with it.
Straight up takes the baby.
Off to a tower, I can only assume.
You don't know. It was just away. She was...
Wow!
Elizabeth, at this point known as Cece, was not allowed to see her daughter.
Cece?
Cece. That is how she is known throughout.
Short for Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's another whole language thing.
Okay.
It makes sense in the Austrian. Okay. She has a second child, which is also harvested by Sophia. Okay.
I okay. Also named Sophia, I assume.
Crap, I forgot. Giselle or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Sadly, she does not show up in the history books past that.
What did Sophia do with her then?
Well, at this point, Sophia starts to get even more irritated with Cece.
Because two girls.
Because two girls. Right?
Okay.
And even like leaves a pamphlet in her room anonymously in
Gross.
Theseus' room that a empress unable to produce a male heir was not worthy of her station. Okay.
Great.
Theseus starts breaking down mentally. Okay. She is prone to these deep depressions.
Why?
And it's awful. Okay, her life is just a nightmare, never-ending nightmare because of her mother. But then she has a son, and it is Rudolph. And having produced a male heir, she actually gets some power.
Okay.
Okay. Being
Yes!
now the Empress Mother, she actually gets a little bit of clout herself, but she retains some bitterness towards Vienna, Sofia, and generally Austria in general.
Why?
You know, moodiness or whatever. Anyway, and so she starts hanging out in Hungary.
Cool.
Which Hungary was part of the Austrian Empire, but they didn't want to be. They tried to win their independence. They had been crushed by Franz Joseph, and were generally seen as these unhinged, unstable rebels.
The Huns, if you will.
The Huns, absolutely. And Sofia, Sisi starts learning Hungarian, hanging out in Hungary, having Hungarian friends, and just generally buddying up with the Hungarians, which actually turns out great because later when Austria gets its butt kicked by Otto von Bismarck, which would also be a whole thing, all of a sudden things start to fall apart as Hungary again wants independence, and because of Sisi, they managed to bring it together and form the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They agreed to grant Hungary its own kingdom as long as Franz and Sisi are their king and queen. And so she becomes Elizabeth, Queen of Hungary, because she is so beloved by the Hungarians. They still kind of hate Austria, but they like her.
Okay, so Hungary now sort of has independence.
Yes, and it becomes the
it's still
Austro-Hungarian Empire. That's what it came from.
Instead of just Austrian.
Yes,
now
they're now equal partners.
Austro-Hungarian, and you have Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria.
And King of Hungary.
And King of Hungary, and her Queen of Hungary.
And Empress of Austria.
And Empress of Austria. So, same people in charge, but kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah, they were actually able to have a little bit more self-governance and things like that. And kind of this idea that they were now partners, and if things really came down to it, a couple generations could split off. You know,
cool.
It was a notable concession made possible by Sisi. And, you know, she has her son now, Rudolph, and he is just awesome. He is the classic crown prince, and he's great and takes after his mother, and she's managed to save the empire by bringing Hungary in, and it's just an amazing story. And yeah, tell me more about...
everyone lived happily ever after.
Everyone lived happily ever after. In fact, you know what? As long as we got this good time going, please tell me more about my favorite Uncle Leo.
Oh, you want to hear more about Leo?
Yes, let's hear more. Since we're on this really great, positive run, let's hear more about just lovable Uncle Leo.
Well, there was this one thing.
Oh?
And actually it's probably not that big a deal because it actually doesn't show up in a lot of history books.
Well, you know,
even until the last few years, it didn't even show up in Belgian history books. So it's probably not that big a deal, but I guess we can cover it a little if you want.
Well, the whole tricycle thing already showed me that it was a little bit eccentric, and everyone has like their little quirks. So, what quirk was this, Mike?
He is a little eccentric, but okay, to understand this wee scandal in Leo's later life, we're actually going to jump to a guy named Edward Dean Morell, if I'm remembering his name correctly. It was mostly you'll see it as E.D. Morell. And he was just kind of an average Joe, actually. Just kind of a normal guy. This stocky guy, great big mustache. And he gets a job with a shipping company as a clerk because he's multilingual.
Okay, cool.
Much like King Leopold II himself. Actually,
polymath, how wonderful.
interesting factoid that may give you some insight into King Leopold's personality. King Leopold spoke a number of languages, including English, French, German, dabblings in virtually every other European language, except for one that may be important, Flemish.
The language
The
spoken
language
in Belgium?
spoken in Belgium. Never bothered to learn it. Didn't see the point.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry to digress. Mr. Morell gets a job as a clerk with this shipping company. And it's a big shipping company because it is responsible for all of the trade between the Free Congo Republic or whatever. What it kept changing names, but what is the name I'm looking for that it mostly went by at this time? Doesn't matter. Between the Congo and Europe, because it's supposed to be a free trade zone, and they're getting things in and out, and they're getting goods back to Europe, and they're sending stuff in, and everything is going great for everyone.
All these philanthropists.
Yeah. And they're trading good stuff to the natives, and the natives are trading good stuff back. So this shipping company is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Because they're responsible for moving all of that commerce.
Good stuff.
So he is in Belgium, and he is called to sit in on this meeting. And he goes in, and it's a guy from the company in the Congo, and he is screaming at the shipping executives because someone at the shipping company leaked a manifest of a ship's cargo going to the Congo to the media. And he wants to know who, and he wants them fired, and he wants their supervisor fired, and he wants his supervisor fired, and he's just red in the face, furious, screaming about this manifest.
Leaked a manifest. Manifest is just what they're shipping. So you're saying he just let the media know what trade goods they were shipping to the Congo?
Exactly.
Well, that doesn't seem that bad. What?
So Morell, much like yourself, is curious about this. He says, okay, well, it's just supposed to be like trade goods, right? So like cloth and beads and
Flour.
and wire and rope and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. He's like, all right, well, I should look into this, right? It's probably nothing, but I'll go have a look. So he goes down and looks into the manifest, and he opens it up and says, I think something's wrong. These aren't trade goods. This is all bullets.
All bullets.
This is just a shipment of guns and bullets.
So more like what you would see being shipped to a war zone, not to a happy free trade zone.
Yes. So he says, well, this is really weird. And he actually goes down to the docks
Strange
and is
stuff.
like, is this okay? This is unusual. Let me look into it some more. What else are we sending? And he goes and looks at another manifest, and it's guns and bullets. And he goes and checks another one, and it's guns and bullets.
That
And he
starts
says,
to paint
okay.
a picture.
This, I'm getting some cold chills. what about what we're getting back? Let's look at like the art and the rubber and the ivory and stuff. And he goes and looks into that. And he says, okay, we're actually we're bringing in more than is being reported. Someone is embezzling massive amounts of money.
Oh.
Massive amounts of money.
Does Uncle Leo know?
Well, we'll find out. He goes to his bosses, and they say, we need you to never mention this again. We need you to shut up right now. And he says, I'm not going to do that. They say, we'll increase your salary. And he says, I'm not going to shut up. They say, we'll give you a job as like a partner. You could be one of the... He says, no, I am going to the press with this because everything that I'm seeing indicates you are killing people. And not just Arab slavers. You don't have anything to trade. You're not trading with the locals. I think you are stealing from them. So he runs off and forms his own newspaper.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. No, he goes to a few different newspapers, but what he discovers is that most of them, when he brings them this story, they say, we're not interested. We have a certain relationship with King Leopold II.
He is our king and very lovable.
Not just in Belgium, in France and in England and in Germany and in the United States.
Oh, no.
All over the world, when he goes to talk to people, they know somebody who knows somebody who wants them to not run this story.
Oh, everybody shut up.
So he starts his own newspaper and starts reaching out saying, hey, anybody that has proof, I need you to come forward. And one of the first things he finds is going back like 10 years. There was a man named George Washington Williams, Colonel George Washington Williams, who had written an open letter to the king. That it was written as kind of this mocking, like, hey, in case you didn't know. And this is back in the days when they're like building the road. This is before things are even really getting going. He writes a letter because he's an American, and he goes there and he talks to the locals and looks around for himself at things. And he writes an open letter to everybody and says, hey, guess what? You came down here to eliminate slavery. This is all slavery. You have enslaved everyone.
You kicked out the Arab slavers to get rid of competition.
Yes. Couldn't help but look around. Everybody's in chains. You're beating them with hippo hide whips. You're killing huge numbers of people. People are being worked to death, starved to death. This is a nightmare.
And that was back when they were building the road?
That was back when they were building the road.
Oh, no.
But when the story came out, it was fairly quickly dismissed for two reasons. One, Colonel George Washington Williams was not, in fact, a colonel. He had served in the army, but he was not a colonel. He was a con man.
Oh, no.
So he was fairly easy to discredit, but probably the most damning of all was that he was a black guy. He was an American black guy, went over there to be like, it's a free, independent African country that the United States has recognized. I've got to see this. And he shows up and it's a nightmare. And he's like, I'm out. I've got to tell somebody.
No.
So yeah, he is widely discredited. He ends up getting sick and dying before he can really get anywhere. He reaches out to another guy, Reverend Shepherd, also a black guy living among the natives, who had been trying to get the story out for years, but everybody was like, yeah, but you're like an American Protestant that's not even Anglican. Like, nobody's going to listen to you because you're this weird religious zealot. So if you tell us that like villages are being wiped out, well, you're just being a little bit, you're being a little bit over enthusiastic. You're a religious crazy person. But There was also, this is the coolest guy, Roger Casement.
Roger Casement, okay?
Roger Casement. He is an Irish explorer, and he goes to the Congo as actually as the English consul. And they bring him in and are like, okay, we've got this whole tour set up for you, and you're going to go on a steamboat up the river, and it's going to be so great, and you're going to get to meet all of these chiefs, and they're going to do dances for you. And he says, haha, no. I've brought my own people. I've brought my own gear. I'm going off on my own. Get your people out of my way.
Oh, I like him.
I like him a lot.
By the way, I hear that all in a thick Irish accent, which made it even better.
100%.
Yes.
He's also a poet.
Oh,
Yeah. No.
he didn't even
100%.
mean that.
Irish poet. He's like, get out of my way. I'm going to look at this myself. And he does. And he discovers that things are way, way worse than anyone was prepared for.
Oh, no.
So it starts with the ivory trade, right? And by trade, I mean they go in, they kidnap people, and then they demand ivory in return for the hostages.
Oh, my.
Okay? This is the opening salvo. Okay? Is they're just working their way through recruiting people for the Força Publique, which is their army. So they're recruiting people to go out and serve with them, and they are gathering up all of the ivory that they possibly can.
Okay.
Already we're being pretty sinister. A lot of people are dying, but we're just getting started.
Oh, no.
It gets much, much worse. One of the things that Leopold... So it's true that he did drive off the Arab slavers. The question is how he did it. Remember how we said he wanted to build schools? 3 great big schools.
Oh, no.
It's child soldiers.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's mostly teenagers.
Oh, no.
Teenagers and children, 75% of which die before they have even completed training.
It killed off 75% of them in training?
Or on their way to training. They the Belgian and generally European, they actually got people from all over. The officers sent out there were given incentives for recruiting. And the cheaper they could get their recruits, the more of a bonus they got. So if they just went and bought their recruits,
Oh, no.
say from Arab slavers,
Oh, no.
then they get a great big bonus. And then they try to drive the Arab slavers out. The Arab slavers respond with their own slave soldiers. So you have slave soldiers fighting slave soldiers.
I think I'm going to be sick.
It's not... Actually, buckle up. We're not quite done yet. So, this is in the ivory. And it's in the middle of this that a Polish guy takes a steamboat up the Congo, intending to work for them full time. His name is Józef Theodor Konrad Korzenowski. Forgive my pronunciation. And he goes up the river and he's taking notes the whole time. And his notes are not great. He's like, yeah, today I saw a dude lying in the middle of the road that had been shot in the face, and I stepped off of the road to get some shade, and this copse was full of people that had been worked to such exhaustion they couldn't stand anymore. And he writes all of these things down, and he goes in and he comes back out, and when he comes back out, he says, I am done. I am out of here. And he skitters away. We'll talk about him later. So he's driven off the Arab slavers. He's gotten a whole bunch of ivory. He's brought out a bunch of art and stuff.
He drove off the Arab slavers with his
Slave child
soldiers.
Yes.
Oh.
So he has now established himself as one of the world's great humanitarians.
Again, this is Uncle Leo, guys.
This is Uncle Leo. Big,
Everybody
fluffy,
loves
white
Uncle
beard,
Leo.
Rides the tricycle, is a little bit of a germaphobe, takes care of his ailing sister Carlotta, Maximilian's widow. Okay, things get worse because everybody's going nuts about rubber. Right? They figured out how to vulcanize rubber. Automobiles are now on the scene, and you need rubber for the tires. People like waterproofing their clothes now. The what are they called? The Macintosh coats are all the rage. So people are waterproofing their clothes with rubber.
High demand.
Hot air balloons are like a craze for a while, and so those are necessary. Well, we talked about dirigibles and stuff, right? All of this is dependent upon rubber. Now, when this starts out, right, people foresee that there's going to be a very high demand for rubber. So there are two ways to get rubber. There are rubber trees, and there are rubber vines.
I actually didn't know about the vines.
Yeah. Rubber trees, you plant them, they grow, and then you tap them just like a maple tree. And you get the gunk out, and you dry it and add sulfur or whatever, and you have rubber.
Cool.
The vines, and so yeah, rubber trees, very easy to harvest. But they take about 20 years before they get to the point that you can actually get any rubber out of them.
Oh, who's got that kind of time?
Leopold's got, well, okay.
Uncle Leo's in a hurry.
Uncle Leo is in a hurry because people foreseeing the rubber boom have started planting rubber orchards in South America and Asia. So he's got 20 years to fill this power vacuum because the Congo is full of rubber vines. Now, rubber vines can grow up to a foot in diameter.
What?
And they stretch up into the trees and like grow over the top of the forest canopy.
Wow.
Right? They grow everywhere. And you can harvest rubber from them, but when you like cut and drain a section, well, that section's done for a while, and you have to climb up into the trees to get to a new section. Up into the trees where there are snakes, or where you can fall to your death, or
dangerous work.
It's very, very dangerous work. But Leopold sees this, and he says, okay, I've got 20 years where I have almost a monopoly on the rubber market. I need all of the rubber that I can possibly get, and I don't care what it costs in human lives.
Oh, I hate this guy.
Thus begins what is known as the Rubber Terror, where he sends the Force Publique. Yeah, gross, right? Anyway. So he sends the Force Publique out into the Congo to all of these tribes, which have already been absolutely terrorized and brutalized by his ivory expeditions. And he says, okay, we need rubber. And we will do whatever it takes to get said rubber. So they're taking hostages and they're beating people. And everything is awful and horrible. And it's very dangerous work. And on top of that, everybody is out working, gathering rubber. Nobody then is available to work the fields. And you get widespread famine.
Oh.
So people start starving to death. And at the same time, there is an epidemic of smallpox.
Oh, no.
And an epidemic of African sleeping sickness.
Oh, sleeping sickness because you die.
You die, yeah.
That's
you fall
the sleeping
asleep and then you
part.
never wake up again. And these epidemics are going nuts because people are being worked to exhaustion. Their immune systems can't handle it, and they die. So things are getting even worse. it gets even worse from there.
Oh, no.
Because you've got the Force Publique now out terrorizing all of these people. But most of the Force Publique are Africans themselves. Right? So you'll have like 5 Europeans for a force of over 100 African soldiers. So they've got to keep them under control because there's starting to be mutterings of mutiny and rebellion.
Well, yeah, you can only do so much working people to death through famine and plague.
Yeah, you can only
Hurts morale.
brutalize so many people. It's pretty bad. So they come up with this idea of like, okay, well, here's what we need to do. They need to have guns, obviously, to do their work. What if we controlled the bullets? So every time they shoot a bullet, they have to bring back a human right hand.
What sort of twisted mind even thinks about that?
It gets worse.
It can't.
Because of the famine, the Force Publique is starving. And so have to spend their bullets hunting.
Oh, no.
But for every bullet spent hunting, you've got to track somebody down.
You owe me
and
a
cut
hand.
off their hand.
Oh.
So, one station in a single year doled out 40,000 replacement rounds. They had to have a member of the Force Publique, an officer whose responsibility was to smoke and preserve human hands.
I think I hate this story more than anything else we have ever done.
It's not great. It's not great. So, let's jump. Okay, so over the course of the Rubber Terror, at the end of the Rubber Terror, when the rubber trees come in and it stops being profitable and they take the Congo away from King Leopold because they figure out what's going on there, and everybody in the world gets involved, including people like Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a personal friend of E.D. Morel, and Mark Twain, who got involved. All of these people get involved and get the Congo taken away from King Leopold.
Good.
King Leopold. Okay, let's jump back in time and give you a little bit more accurate description of some of the key players. King Leopold II, from the time that he was very young, was described as being dead-eyed, without enthusiasm or the capacity to inspire it in others. Otto von Bismarck essentially described him as, I forget the exact wording, but basically like a dead-eyed, soulless little creep.
A sociopath.
A sociopath. And a lot of the time we say like, oh yeah, he was a sociopath, but we mean, oh, he was a bad person. No, he was likely, well, sociopath maybe, more likely a psychopath. He hated music. He hated animals. He hated his children. It was said later in his life that King Leopold had only 2 ambitions in this life: to die a billionaire and to disown his daughters.
What?
Well, because his one daughter he married off to a guy who was extremely abusive, and she tried to leave him. So he had her imprisoned and tried to disinherit her. The other one married a mere prince, but not the one that he wanted her to marry, so he tried to disinherit her.
Oh, I can tell you that story. Was it Stephanie?
I believe so.
Oh, I'll tell you that story.
Let's try to power on through to the end and try to
Okay.
fit a happy story towards the end here.
Okay, but Stephanie brings about World War I. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, cool. All right. So he is this dead-eyed, soulless creep. The only things that he likes in this world is making money and underage prostitutes.
Oh.
Yep. So he is awful. his best friend, what's his name? Henry Morton Stanley, famous explorer, on and on and on and on, also a psychopath, well known for murdering people, cruelty to animals, torture. He just shot his way across Africa. All of the treaties that he signed, were signed under duress. Right? He just tortured and burned his way across Africa. He was also described as being just dead-eyed, soulless, completely without feeling or sympathy. He was a monster. General Henry Shelton Sanford, Leopold II's man in the United States, not a general, perpetual grifter. In the end, even he couldn't put up with Leopold, but already couldn't stop things that were in motion, and died broken and betrayed by Leopold, who he thought was his best friend.
Oh, man. If anyone among our listeners develops time travel, forget going back and killing Hitler. Kill this guy. King Leopold II. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to be sick.
Towards the end of his life, after his wife dies, by the way, his wife was super cool.
Leopold's wife was super cool?
Yeah, she was great.
Oh, my
goodness. When they got married, I think it was Queen Victoria said that it was that rather than a prince and a princess, it was like a marriage between a stable boy and a nun. And Leopold is the nun. Because his wife was awesome. She loved animals. She loved horses. And she would train her own horses so well that she could send them to her rooms in the palace to fetch things. Yes. The general, she became really good friends with this general, and he was so impressed with her that he would have her come out to the parade grounds and lead practice cavalry charges.
That's amazing.
She was awesome. He treated her like garbage, and she died miserable because he was a monster. After she dies, he becomes very blatant about this, about his favorite, the biographies of the time, or his favorite mistress, this 16-year-old girl, who, it turns out, yes, is a con woman and steals huge amounts of his money. Yes!
I don't even know what to think about that.
Steal from him and then stab him. She does not stab him, unfortunately. She remains at least superficially loyal to him until he eventually dies of stomach cancer, probably stomach cancer. They were kind of euphemistic about what he ends up dying of. They say that it's like an intestinal blockage, but it was probably stomach cancer.
Good.
He dies. Thank heaven. But first they take the Congo away from him while he is still alive. The parliament comes in and says, no. We've read all this stuff, and the entire world is perturbed about this whole, like,
we are
human
most
hands
displeased, sir.
We are most displeased, sir. He actually was able to put it off for a long time because he kept just, like, dumping money into these, like, public monuments and, like, beautification projects. And he built this weird Japanese tower that he saw and thought looked cool.
Oh, I've got one more. When reports did start coming out of possible atrocities in the Congo, he said, well, we need to put a stop to that, and created an organization for the protection of the natives.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And, sorry,
he did that twice, actually.
Yeah, so he was very good at smoke screens.
The first time it worked, because it was all his flunkies. And they just came back and were like, we found 2 guys that were really bad and were using severed heads as lawn ornaments.
Good job, we got rid of those guys.
Good thing we got rid of those guys. And it all came back fine. The second time, he sends all of his flunkies down, just like, same thing as last time, guys. Let's go. They go down there, and according to reports at the time, one of the judges that he sends, upon seeing the evidence, breaks down and cries in the courtroom.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he was human.
because not even his flunkies, like his bought and paid for guys, were willing to turn a blind eye at that point. So, they take away the Congo. Before they do, his office spends 8 days burning records.
Oh.
He says they can take away my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there.
Oh.
He burns the records, hands over control. At this point, it's not even that profitable anymore, and he just kind of, I'm out. Cash me out. Not only that, he gets Parliament to pick up the debts of the colony.
Oh.
He's like, no. Debts are off of my hands. So he goes off, dies of stomach cancer.
It's not enough.
It really doesn't. It doesn't feel like enough. So
I understand he was hated by his people, though. So that makes me feel a little bit better.
yes, but not for very long, and not primarily for the Congo thing.
Ah, dang it.
Mostly for how he treated his daughters.
Oh.
So, he dies. They find out that he's left most of his fortune, contrary to law, to his mistress. They find out that he's embezzled massive amounts of money from the Belgian state and from the Congo and from his sister. Remember Carlotta?
Carlotta? The poor crazy idealist?
Poor crazy idealist that's been living in this castle alone. He has embezzled her entire estate and replaced it with bonds for the Congo. There you go. That'll buy something real nice for you.
Oh, no.
Okay.
She spent most of those 40 years just looking at pictures of Maximilian and weeping.
She refused to believe he was dead for most of that time. It wasn't until decades later that she actually came to grips with it. And anyway, it's a whole sad thing. So, Leopold, after he's gone, the Belgian government goes in and they start snooping around. Namely, they're looking around and saying, where did all the people go? Here come the numbers. They figure that when Stanley first came to the Congo, the region had between 20 and 30 million inhabitants.
Okay.
By the time they wrested control from King Leopold, 50% of those people had been killed.
Oh, man, that is a huge genocide.
Between 10 and 15 million people.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
So, Holocaust numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that might be the worst guy ever.
Now, jump forward. Well, there's other
Do I have to?
There's other unfortunate things that happen in the in-between. But you jump forward to like the 70s. And there's a Belgian historian who works for the Belgian State Department, who is I can't remember what country he's visiting, but they mention, oh, by the way, Belgium was responsible for 10 million deaths in the Congo in the early years of the 20th century. By the way, early years of the 20th century, they were still
1900s.
This is 1900s. They were still impressing locals to harvest rubber into World War II.
Oh.
That's how recent this is.
Ah.
But 1970s historian working for the Belgian State Department hears this number and says, that's not real. That's not a
Can't
thing,
be.
right? I would have heard about this.
Yeah, if my country was responsible for 10 million deaths,
If my country was
that would
responsible
have come
for
up.
a Holocaust, I feel like I would have heard about it.
You would think.
You would think. And that's where awareness starts coming back, right? Because people had kind of moved on, right? We had this like global outrage with like Mark Twain and Arthur Conan Doyle and everything. You had this global human rights movement, but they kind of felt like we did it,
Woo!
and kind of didn't look back. Until, it was in the 70s that he heard about it. It was into the 80s before he was actually able to access any of the documents.
Oh, man.
Because they were still kept under lock and key, lest anybody find out about this stuff. So, moral of the story is...
King Leopold II was the worst. The
just an
absolute worst.
monster. Like, up there with, like, Haber and stuff.
Oh, man.
Oh,
man.
Okay, I do have a way to wrap this up. Okay, so I'm going to take you back in time 1 week. 1 week ago, we're talking, and we decide, okay, we're going to, for the 5th Thursday, we're going to do a special bonus story stream. And, okay, subject, English, or not English, European royalty. And I say, okay, but I only have half the time to research, and I don't know anything about European royalty. This isn't my strong suit. I don't have any stories up my sleeve, right? Usually I've read about stuff in the past, and I just have to brush up. This would be completely new research for me. And Lance says, well, let me softball you one. I heard about a King Leopold II that maybe you could talk about. Why don't you take that one? And I said, okay. Okay, so.
Yeah. Mike often does the more dark and depressing ones anyways.
I do, but.
I set him up.
He really did.
Straight up.
I shotgunned this book. This is King Leopold's Ghost. King Leopold's Ghost. Shotgunned this beast in 2 days. And it feels like my soul has a sunburn. It's it's just so much stuff and so many stories of heroism, right? You have your just everyday guys like Reverend Shepherd and like Casement and like Morell, who were just everyday guys. And like in the case of Williams and Shepherd, were black guys in a time when they were distinctly, like definitively second-class citizens. They stepped forward and said something and did something, and in the end brought down the leader of an international conspiracy. Wow. But, oh man, I wish it wasn't so bad. Let's circle back to our steamboat captain, Josef Theodor Konrad Koreniowski. He shortened his name to make it more marketable and started going by Joseph Conrad and wrote this little volume, Heart of Darkness, which many of you likely had to read in high school or college or something. It is one of the most influential stories, novellas, whatever you want to call it, of this time period. And after finishing that book, I felt like I had to read this. So I shotgunned that as well. Pretty incredible. Especially incredible when you realize it's only partially fiction. Many of the passages from this book were direct excerpts from Conrad's notebook that he kept while working as a steamboat captain on the Congo River.
Oh, man.
Oh, the horror. The horror.
All right. Well, I hate to end on that note, but we are already half an hour past our allotted time. I do actually have...
the horror is the note we want to go out on?
Nothing for it. Nope, we're out of time for tonight. We are actually going to stick around and record some more for our Patreon content to thank those supporters.
I
next week,
have homework for you kids at home. If you don't have time to read Heart of Darkness, which is completely understandable, go listen to the song France Afrique by Refused. You'll know it because it starts with a children's choir chanting "Exterminate all the brutes," and then a Swedish guy screaming "Kill, kill, kill." These are both references to Heart of Darkness. And honestly, a pretty great Swedish punk song.
What on earth are you talking about? Okay, well, that happened.
It's a good way to sum things up.
Okay.
A little musical interlude for you.
Okay, well, I agree with Kat Harker from the comments here. Well, this has been horrific. Join us next week. We will not be talking more about this. We will actually be talking with Alan Johnson for Tell Me a Story, talking about HEMA, historical European martial arts, which is going to be very, very cool. Like I said, we are actually going to hang out here a little bit more and talk a little bit more. There was specifically more to the story of Sisi, Empress of Austria, and how all that led to World War I. To be honest, there is a direct link there. So we'll have that on Patreon and might be releasing that later on YouTube. But thank you all for coming. Make sure that you like and comment, and of course check us out on Patreon. We've really enjoyed doing this. This is something that even when we have these dark, horrific stories, they are important stories. Like, I literally felt sick hearing about King Leopold, but the fact that I knew just enough to set you up. Right?
Thank you.
I knew that it was. I knew that it was horrifying. I knew that they were cutting off human hands. I knew it was going to be horrible. But
you didn't know that he would be an internationally renowned for his humanitarianism during that time.
I actually even knew that, but I didn't know the numbers. I didn't know the numbers. I didn't know all the things that went into it. I didn't know the systems they had in place. I was horrified. But like I said, these are important stories. These are things that it is important that we know about. Because, that's the thing they always say about history. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And that is one of the reasons why we do this, is to understand these stories, not just the dates and the people and all the dry facts. Public education can get you that. We are here for the stories and being able to see those in our own lives. Hopefully not stories like this ever again. Anyway, like I said, join us next week. And thank you all.
Yeah. And I'll post that song in the comments. I got you. Got you, Alex. But yeah. Thanks, everybody.